I'm halfway through my senior year of high school, and my stomach is tied in knots because I've just come out to my mom. I can breathe a sigh of relief when she tells me she loves me anyway. But that's when she says, Adam, since we're being honest, I have a secret too. Your father is not your father. Wow, Mom, your secret is better, right? Like, you definitely win this. Never play that game with a Jewish mother. She's definitely going to win. So Mom goes on to explain that she had an affair with a man shortly after marrying her husband. When she realized she was pregnant, she just never said anything. And then when I was born, my father was none the wiser, the man that I always called Dad. So I'm sitting there, and yes, I'm shocked, right? I'm definitely shocked. But very quickly, I'm sort of a little bit happy. And let me explain why. When I was 5 years old, we lived in Maryland. And my family was me, my mom, my dad, and our golden retriever, Rusty. And I had friends and playmates and stuff, but when we moved from Maryland to Los Angeles that year, all of a sudden, Rusty became not only my best friend, but also like a sister or a sibling. Shortly after we moved into an apartment in LA, my parents realized that they couldn't keep the dog. The apartment building would not let them keep the dog, and they gave Rusty away. Being an only child, having your best friend be taken away from you in a new city, I just never felt more alone. And in that moment, I blamed my dad, because he was the reason we had to move, so he could take a job in Los Angeles. And that's when I started wishing that my dad was not my dad. And I literally would blow out the candles on my birthday cake and make the wish. 2 years later, my parents divorced, and it wasn't everything I wished for, but it was a good start. You know? He'd come on visitation weekends and really just try and connect with me, and the more he tried, the more I'd push him away. So here I am, just days after having my childhood wish answered, right? And I realized that somebody has to break the news to Dad. But Mom, she can't call her ex-husband and do it. She can't tell him now any more than she could have, the day she found out she was pregnant. So I decide, bright idea, I'm going to call him. And I call Dad up and I say, hey, Dad, listen, I've got two things to tell you. The first one you probably know, which is that I'm gay. And then he said, oh, no, I didn't know that. Oh, well, yeah, well, I'm gay, but that's not really why I'm calling. And I tell him the whole story. So the weird thing is that, Dad's not upset at me. Him and Mom have a lot to talk about, but he's not upset at me, and we actually started having a better relationship. Not a good relationship, but a better than the one we had before. And, time goes by. I'm now late into my years in college, and I'm sitting in this 3-day relationship seminar that I've taken so that I can get over a bad breakup that I've had. And I just find myself really thinking about my relationship with my dad. I kind of realized that, maybe I didn't always really give him a fair shake when I was growing up. So I pick up the phone and I call Dad from the break on the last night. And I said, hey, Dad, listen, I just really wanted to tell you that even though I've always hated you because of what happened with Rusty, I do appreciate the things you've done for me, like paying for college, even after you found out that I wasn't your son. He didn't need to do that. But that's the kind of guy he was. And, Dad is kind of surprised. He's like, what are you doing calling me from a weird seminar about Rusty? This is actually very disturbing for him. And so I very quickly get to the thing that I really was most afraid to say. I said, Dad, listen, here's why I'm really calling. I want us to try being father and son again. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. And the other end of the phone is completely silent. And I think, did he just hang up? But then I realized he's actually crying really, really softly. And my dad doesn't cry, so now I'm starting to tear up a little bit. And that's when Dad says that since he found out that I was going to be born, he's devoted his whole life to giving me all the things that he never had growing up. And that when we moved to Los Angeles, it was because he'd been unemployed for years, and his cousin offered him a job, and we didn't have a lot of choices. Now who's starting to feel like the bad guy, right? and then I just listen, you know, and I start listening to my dad like a human being, not like my father, really for the first time. And that's when Dad starts telling me about his dad and his father and growing up and all his hopes and dreams. And then the strangest thing happens on the phone call, something I didn't expect and frankly never would have wanted. Dad and I don't just become father and son on this phone call, we become best friends. And we stayed that way until he passed away 12 years later. When I think about the gifts that I'm most thankful for in life, it's those last 12 years of a relationship that Dad and I chose to create together. And if he was here with us tonight, I think he'd say the same thing. Thank you.